Throughout history, very few countries have never been taken over by outside forces. Afghanistan is one of these special places. Many powerful armies have tried to control this Middle Eastern country: Alexander the Great, the Persians, the Mongols, the British Empire, and the Soviet Union. All of them failed. This is why Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. What makes Afghanistan so hard to conquer? Many military experts say it's the land itself. The country has huge mountain ranges with hidden paths, valleys, lookout points, and cave systems. These natural hiding places have helped entire armies disappear from enemy sight. In recent years, British, Australian, Canadian, and American soldiers trying to find rebel fighters in these mountains faced the same overwhelming challenge. But some of these soldiers discovered something far stranger than enemy fighters hiding in Afghanistan's mountains. They found creatures that most people believe are either extinct or completely made up. After the September 11th attacks, the United States military started Operation Enduring Freedom in October 2001. Their goal was to destroy the Taliban government that was protecting al-Qaeda terrorists responsible for the attacks. When faced with superior American air power, Taliban forces quickly left the cities and hid in the nation's vast, rough mountain ranges. From these natural fortresses, the rebels launched fierce attacks against American troops and their Western allies. The Kandahar region was identified as a key Taliban stronghold. To secure the mountains and disrupt Taliban supply lines and operations, the Americans used a search and destroy strategy. These missions involved ground troops, often special operations forces like U.S. Army Rangers and Navy SEALs, thoroughly searching areas known or suspected to contain enemies. Sometime in early 2002, one of these patrols disappeared completely. After a long period with no radio contact, another Special Forces team was quickly sent into the Kandahar Mountains to find the missing men and bring back either their bodies or any survivors. What they found was far beyond anything they had been trained for. The second team found pieces of scattered military gear and torn uniforms that clearly belonged to the missing men. Following this strange trail with their rifles ready, they worked their way up a steep mountain path until they found themselves standing in front of several large caves. But the caves weren't what first caught their attention. Scattered on the ground in front of the cave entrances were piles of bones. Before they could figure out their next move, the Special Forces team suddenly faced a terrifying reality. A giant man emerged from one of the caves, letting out a primitive war cry that echoed off the surrounding mountains. It was wielding a long wooden spear, had thick, untamed red hair, wore animal skins, and showed its teeth in a primitive challenge. It charged directly at the stunned Americans. Before the men could even raise their rifles, the giant thrust its massive spear through the chest of the nearest soldier, lifting him off the ground. This prompted the other men to open fire. After 30 seconds of continuous shooting, the giant finally fell down, ending the horrifying encounter. The soldiers immediately radioed back to their command with what must have been the most unbelievable situation report ever heard. It took time to clarify what they were trying to report: that one of their team members was dead and they had just killed his attacker, a literal giant. After submitting their report, they remained on site waiting for the extraction team and examining the size of this creature. The giant was described as being at least 13 feet tall and having 6 fingers on each hand. Its mouth showed 2 rows of teeth. The men also realized the horrible truth about the piles of bones and military gear they had seen: the giant had clearly eaten the missing team members. The giant's body was evidently of great interest to someone in command. A Chinook transport helicopter arrived with loading equipment and gear to take the giant back with them. The return trip was made worse by the creature's awful smell. Upon arrival back at base, the men were immediately questioned. After each man shared his account of the mission, they were made to sign non-disclosure agreements, forever swearing to secrecy about the encounter. They never saw the creature's body after leaving the helicopter and had no proof of their incredible experience. The story of the Kandahar giant first became public in 2008, about 6 years after the incident supposedly took place. The original testimony came not from any of the soldiers who reportedly killed the giant, but from the pilot of the helicopter that transported its body out of the mountains. This anonymous pilot was interviewed on the Coast to Coast AM radio program. Since he only witnessed the loading and transport of the giant's body, his testimony included very little about what had happened before the helicopter arrived. The pilot simply explained only what he had personally seen and was honest about hearing most of what had happened secondhand from the soldiers. The pilot described the giant as being covered by a large tarp and strapped to a standard aircraft loading pallet. He had a clear view of the creature's hands and feet. The feet, covered in canvas material like basic shoes, were at least 28 to 30 inches long. Curled into a fetal position to fit on the pallet, the pilot estimated the giant would have easily measured 12 feet in height if laid out straight. The pilot could accurately say how much it weighed, approximately 1,100 pounds without the pallet and rigging. The fingers were pale white in color, appearing Caucasian, which was surprising considering the dark skin of local people. He also described the awful musky, skunk-like smell coming from the creature. When asked where the giant ended up, he wasn't sure but got the impression it had been sent to an Air Force base in Ohio, likely Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is notably involved with strange and unexplained things. Since the story began making headlines in 2022, the Kandahar giant has become a popular topic in cryptid lore. More service members from different countries have come forward to share their own testimonies about similar things they saw during their combat deployments in Afghanistan. One soldier serving in northeastern Afghanistan several years after the original Kandahar story was using a new thermal imaging system when he spotted something unusual. He saw what he first thought was a group of Taliban huddled together, but then the heat signature stood up as one being. The trees in that area grew to about 10 to 12 feet tall, and this creature was at least as big if not taller than the surrounding trees. The creature moved with incredible speed despite taking slow, relaxed steps. It quickly crossed the landscape before disappearing from view. The soldier kept this experience to himself until hearing about the Kandahar giant story, which brought back memories of his deployment. He also remembered that locals in his area would sometimes dye their hair bright orange and dye their goats the same color. These orange-dyed goats would then disappear, and the locals' hair would no longer be orange. He wondered if this was some kind of gesture to the creatures or if the goats were being sacrificed to them. An Air Force veteran who operated unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, shared his sighting of giants in Afghanistan's northern mountains. While scanning a small village, he found giants near mud huts. They were about 10 to 13 feet tall, which he could measure using the ruler tool on his screen. The giants didn't do anything unusual, just normal activities like tending fires and doing chores. They seemed to wear rough clothing similar to traditional Afghan clothing but appeared heavily cloaked. The only remarkable thing was their size. Goats nearby looked like cats compared to them. He could only observe them for about 10 minutes before flying too far away to see them. An Air Force intelligence analyst reviewing video footage from the Kinnar province between 2012 and 2018 was analyzing patterns of life in an area used by Taliban fighters. While watching people around a fire, what he thought were two people huddled under a blanket stood up, revealing one person who made the others look like children in comparison. This giant, at least 8 or 9 feet tall, walked over to a mud hut that he had to bend way over to enter. Unlike some other accounts, this giant appeared to be living peacefully with local villagers. An Australian Army lieutenant serving in Uruzgan province was on security duty one morning when he saw a large human-like figure through his thermal imager. The figure looked different from normal because it wasn't wearing typical Afghan clothing. It appeared more slender than usual people. Using his laser rangefinder to measure distance, he was shocked to discover the figure was 1,800 meters away, much farther than he initially thought. This meant the creature would have been at least 12 feet tall. He followed it for about 5 minutes before it disappeared from view. A journalist and Army combat veteran shared a story from his patrol near the eastern Afghan border with Pakistan. While gathering intelligence by interviewing local village leaders, one man through an interpreter warned them to avoid the nearby mountains. The villager described a group of individuals living there that most locals tried to avoid. These individuals had pale skin, harassed locals while they fed their goats in the highlands, and threw large rocks at them. When asked if these pale-skinned individuals carried weapons or were Taliban, the villager said no, they were like the American soldiers, white, but wore local clothing. He described them as having beards, being heavily built, and super tall. Years later, when the soldier heard about Afghan giants, he realized the description matched up with the remote location where the villager had pointed. The existence of giants isn't just a modern military story. Historical records going back 5,000 to 6,000 years document giants. The Bible tells of Goliath, a giant who fought with the Philistine army, standing nearly 10 feet tall and carrying a bronze spear with a tip weighing nearly 15 pounds. Goliath wasn't the only giant mentioned in ancient texts. King David and his men fought and killed other remnants of an ancient giant race in later battles. These were often called the Rephates or Rephaim, descendants of a giant named Rapha. Another giant killed by King David's brother Jonathan was described as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all, just like the Kandahar giant. A giant named Og was made king over the region of Bashan. He was cited as being one of the last of the Rephates and had an iron bed measuring 13 feet long by 6 feet wide because he needed something stronger than wood. While the U.S. Department of Defense officially states they have no record of a Special Forces member being killed by a giant in Kandahar, this denial hasn't reduced interest in the story. Instead, it has encouraged more service members to come forward with their own testimonies. These accounts, shared by soldiers from different countries and time periods, all describe similar creatures. Very tall humanoid beings living in Afghanistan's remote mountains. Some appear to be aggressive and dangerous, like the Kandahar giant, while others seem to coexist peacefully with local populations. The consistency of these independent accounts, combined with the matter-of-fact way the witnesses tell their stories, suggests there may be some truth to the existence of these mysterious beings. Whether they are remnants of an ancient race of giants, unknown human populations, or something else entirely remains a mystery. Until more concrete evidence surfaces, we are left to wonder about these accounts from military personnel who seem certain of what they saw in Afghanistan's mountains.